Hey friends. So, kind of a funny image came to me this morning. And I was thinking about my whole thing, which I've talked about now for several days. And there's something that I recognized, and I had actually done a little like voice memo on it a couple of days ago to kind of remind myself. Of a pattern. It's almost like a meta pattern. I'll explain what I mean by that. But I was realizing that my primary addiction is thought. That's my thing. And it's a big one. I'll bet, A, that I'm not the only person who's like this. And B, that, outside of kind of meditation, spiritual practice circles, it's really easy to pass this off as just normal human behavior, normal human functioning, which it is in many ways. But it's also totally debilitating because, when I was talking yesterday about wasting time and not wasting time, and there's no such thing as wasted time, and really we can't really waste time because there's no such thing as time, but we can waste or miss the now because we can be oriented towards our thought and paying attention to that, which means memory, which means history, which means a long string of stories and a giant cocktail of inner life that takes our focus off of infinity, off of the now, off of what's actually real right now. It makes us think that things are real that are not real. So then I was kind of reflecting on how I get myself addicted to thought, and it was and one of the things that came up, and again, this is something, it's not necessarily a new thought for me, but it's a new level of clarity around it. Because the ultimate kind of ego fantasy for me, for someone like me, and I know that there are other people out there, but the ultimate ego fantasy is enlightenment, right? It's easy to identify ego fantasies when they're overtly materialistic or, just shallow, superficial, petty, when they reflect the 7 deadly sins that we all grown up hearing about, when they're kind of on the surface of things, very obviously self-centered, then it's very easy to be like, oh yeah, that's ego. But when the ego fantasy is spiritual enlightenment, it's a little harder to see. It's a little harder to immediately go, oh, that's an ego fantasy, because you kind of have to look at what's really going on in the human being? How are they going about this? What's the actual day-to-day practice? Where is our awareness in every moment? And again, speaking as myself, I think I've become pretty good at passing off to myself the idea that practice and, at various points along the way in my journey, it's been, discipline has been part of it, focus, and all of the elements of spiritual practice, of spiritual evolution, have kind of become these additional tools for the ego to use. And because at the end of the day, if you look at if you look at an enlightened person, which I don't see too many of them out there, but there are some people who just very overtly will say, I have had this experience. Like someone like Sadhguru has no qualms about telling you what his experience has been and what it has done to his perspective and where he's speaking from. And anytime I hear him speak, it's like so obvious that that's where he is. There's no filter between that dimension and what's coming through. And so, as someone who feels that that's my focus in life, kind of spiritual transformation, seeing that in action, seeing that in the world, is like the ultimate fantasy. It's like the perfect, because it's like someone who's so beyond thought that thought just becomes it's like they're spinning these streamers of insight across the cosmos, and we just get to watch. So I think that's where that's how I'm kind of that's what I mean when I say enlightenment is the ultimate ego fantasy. Obviously, the reality of enlightenment and the reality of a practice and a life of devotion towards that end is not an ego fantasy. But I think in my mind, it is somewhat that, and the reason I can say that is because if it weren't, then my journey would be very direct. It'd be very simple. There wouldn't be a lot of, deviations and twists and turns. I mean, again, this isn't necessarily, I'm not necessarily diagnosing myself with a pathology, but kind of borderline I am, because it's also something that really does feel debilitating. It feels like it slows me down and it inhibits my growth, because I have this, because the idea of where I'm going and the ideas along the way are so compelling that they let the ego kind of slip right in there and really draw my focus away from the task of transformation. And so I'm clocking this, I'm saying this because it's, I think, a really important thing to be aware of. It's certainly better to be aware of it than to be running that pattern and not know that that's what's happening, and think that it's kind of where I've been going over the last couple of days, with recognizing that it's about orientation, and that incremental progress isn't going to get you to infinity. All those kind of insights that kind of make obvious the distinction between a fixation of our mind and a deeper, kind of more connected practice. I had this other funny image come up of like the ego as basically like one of those sketchy hitchhikers that's always going wherever you're going. So if it's like you're going to Vegas to blow a bunch of money and do a bunch of drugs, the ego's like, yeah, let's do that. But if the ego shows up and stops the car, it's like, well, where are you going? I'm going to spiritual enlightenment. Oh, that's where I'm going. Can I hitch a ride? The ego will go anywhere we are going. It will happily follow, and it will easily incorporate itself into whatever journey we're on, whether it's superficial or deep, or seemingly superficial or seemingly deep. It can hitch a ride on anything. So that's good to know. That's a good thing to just kind of be able to track and identify, and hopefully, buddhi is the property of mind, the discriminating property of mind, as I learned about it in Advaita Vedanta way back so many years ago. It's that property of mind that discriminates between reality and unreality and everything else. It's the discriminating, choosing faculty in the mind. And learning what some of these distinctions are and how they look can give us the tools to discriminate better, to catch an ego fantasy before it builds as much momentum. So that's what showed up this morning, my ego as a hitchhiker. Thanks for watching. Appreciate you. Have a great day. I'll see you tomorrow.